Good afternoon. I'm calling the hearing of the Assembly Education Committee to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll and establish a quorum?
O'Donnell?
Here.
O'Donnell?
Here.
Chavez? Here. Chavez here. Kim? Here. Kim here. McCarty? Here. Okay. Yeah, sure. Santiago?
Here. So then I go to this.
Santiago here.
Right now.
Thurmond?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Weber?
And then you can take up, forget about that, and just announce that you're going to be taking up 158.
Okay.
I don't know. It's not working. Oh, there it is.
Okay, so do we have a quorum? Yes. Thank you. A quorum has been established. We have 16 bills on file today, and 5 of them are on consent. The bills on consent are AB 163, AB 220, that's with amendments recommended in the committee analysis, AB 331, with amendments recommended in the committee analysis, and AB 377, and AJR 5. We will hear bills and sign in order, and we're ready for our first author, but actually our first author today, we're going to take a little bit of a unique venture today. I'm going to bring up a bill right now, and I'm going to turn over the chair to Mr. Chavez, and in fact the gavel to Mr. Chavez. So there we are.
Could we please have AB 158? Assemblyman O'Donnell, please present.
Good afternoon, committee members. I am proud to present AB 158 in honor of Mr. John Mockler, a very good man. Technically, this bill names Chapter 2 of Part 24 of Division 3 of Title 2 of the Education Code, the John B. Mockler School Finance Act. Chapter 2 contains the statutory provisions that implement Proposition 98. We figured John's fingerprints were all over this portion of the Ed Code, so we might as well name it after him. As many of you know, John died earlier this month of pancreatic cancer at the age of 73. He was a towering figure in California education policy and finance for more than 4 decades. John served the students of California in a number of capacities, including as staff to what was then the Ways and Means Committee, as Secretary of Education, and as the Executive Director of the State Board of Education. In between his terms in public service, John joined with Jim Murdoch to form the lobbying firm of Murdoch, Mockler, and Association, which later became Strategic Education Services. Informally, John was a key advisor to Governors Davis, Schwarzenegger, and Brown on school finance issues. He had a sharp intellect, a keen sense of humor, and above all, a passionate devotion to public education and the students it serves. He is missed, but always remembered. John was the principal author of Proposition 98, the constitutional minimum school funding guarantee. It is more than appropriate that the provisions in the Education Code that implement Proposition 98 be named in his honor, and it is an honor to recommend that we do so today.
Move approval.
I move approval by Ms. Weber, second by Ms. Kim. Would you have testimony and support, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Rick Simpson. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff for Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins, also her education consultant. John was a friend of mine for at least 35 years, and Mr. O'Donnell asked me if I might make a few comments. I consider John one of my 2 mentors in this enterprise of public education policy. He's actually responsible for me moving from the Senate over to the Assembly, so if you have a problem with me, it's John's fault, not my fault. I basically wanted to dispel a couple of myths about John, And one is that John is the diabolical genius that created this complex Proposition 98 constitutional guarantee that only like 3 or 4 people in the whole world can understand. Now, I will tell you that the constitutional minimum guarantee is pretty complex, can be pretty opaque at times. We have Test 3, we have maintenance factors, we have Test 1 and Test 3 lines crossing, we have a fiscal situation where the maintenance factor repayment is gobbling up, almost every dime of additional money. The problem is, with the myth, is none of that was in Proposition 98. All the complexity of Prop 98 was imposed by the legislature, mainly the Senate, of course, in Proposition 111, 2 years later. I think the genius of what John did in school finance and with the constitutional amendment was its simplicity and elegance, if you will, of a relatively simple structure for providing a minimum guarantee for public education. It was the complexity that's gotten so much play over the last 3 or 4 weeks was really imposed by the legislature. As I say, John's contribution was simple but elegant school finance formula. The other legacy I'd like to dispel is that myth that I'd like to dispel is that John's legacy is Prop 98 and school finance in general. It is true that's what he's best known for, and that's what most of the writing and conversation has been about over the last couple of weeks. But John's real legacy is throughout the body of education policy in this state. John was passionate about equity, passionate about disadvantaged students, about students with disabilities. In the early 1970s, I believe it was, and Dave can probably correct me if I'm wrong, John was one of the early architects of what was called EDY, Educationally Disadvantaged Youth, the first state-dedicated funding for disadvantaged students in California that became Economic Impact Aid later on. In 1980, John was a key contributor to SB 1870, the master plan. This expanded the master plan for special ed statewide across California. That made state policy the inclusion of disabled students within mainstream of education. In 1984, a couple of years later, John was the moving force behind many of you will recall AB 3632, that shifted responsibility for some of the medical services for disabled students from public schools to the state and county agencies that had the expertise to provide the occupational therapy, psychotherapy, physical therapy. That bill, by the way, was opposed by everybody in the Deukmejian administration in 1984, except, of course, Governor Deukmejian, who saw the value of it and the importance of it to disabled students and signed that despite the opposition of all his staff. And I think probably his most important contribution was he was the Assembly's major negotiator, major architect of the landmark 1983 Senate Bill 813 that was, in my opinion, a far more sweeping school finance and education policy reform than anything we've seen at LCFF. It not only rewrote school finance post Prop 13, it created the first California high school graduation course requirements, it extended the school day and school year, it overhauled student expulsion and suspension laws, it raised minimum teacher salaries to try to recruit teachers to the classroom, created the mentor teacher program, changed the probationary period and dismissal rules for new teachers, many, many more. John, as I say, was one of the major architects of that and contributed as much as, or more than anybody else. I think it's no exaggeration to say that John's work both in school finance and education policy improved the quality of education for millions of students in this state over the course of his career. They'll never know who to thank for that, but we do. And so I would ask you to join Mr. O'Donnell, my boss, the Speaker, in supporting this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe we have 2 testimonies for pro and con. Who would like?
Yes, my name is Estelle Lemieux, and I'm with the California Teachers Association. I have known John for over 20 years. I'm sorry. I don't want to go there. He was a true education guru. And as Rick Simpson mentioned, he valued public education and had the rare gift of transforming good policy into what worked in our schools and in our classrooms. And he did care very much for our neediest students in the state. And I had the opportunity of working with him because he was California Teachers Association's consultant for the last over 25 years, and I've been working there for 20 years. So he too was a mentor for me. His ability to make very complex issues and explain them in a simple way so that those of us who were just kind of getting into the policy world, he had a way of being able to translate it and make it understandable. And I will, I had that honor, and I have many memories of good things that John, I'm too emotional about this. Let me just go on to say that our executive director of the California Teachers Association, Joe Nunez, recalled immediately after his death and said that John's brilliance, his tireless energy, and his wicked sense of humor never allowed bureaucracy of politics to get in the way of what's right for kids. He solved more state budgets on the back of napkins than any governor, and did it faster than any computer could be programmed. It was a privilege to have known and worked with John, and that's the way we feel, the whole family at the California Teachers Association. It's often said that anyone can be replaced, but John, we have to say, was the exception to that rule. And so it is with great honor that the California Teachers Association support having John's name and part of his legacy in the education code. So thank you for introducing
Thank you
this.
very much for your testimony. Since it's such a touchy and emotional issue, we'll have one more testimony in support before we go to so please.
Dave Walrath, probably the one who's known John the longest, for 40 years. Met him in 1975. Not only everything that Estelle has said and everything Rick has said, John had a tremendous breadth of knowledge and skills and capabilities. We talk about operational. In AB 65, the Serrano 2 solution, how to address the Serrano v. Priest decision to achieve equity, as Rick talked about, the driving compassion for equity. That legislation, John was a major factor in. I was on the other side. We were adversaries at the time, working for the Department of Finance, and he was working for the Department of Education. But there was always the respect and knowledge of his true skills, his knowledge, his ability to craft solutions to problems and issues. We talk about school finance. We talk about policy. He also was involved on school facilities. The current school facility program, SB 50, John was instrumental in crafting that, in developing that structure that we are continuing to use for school facility equity. His skill, his knowledge, his breadth, I agree with Estelle, can never be replaced. It is fitting to definitely to name this part of the code after him, and if you could do it, probably the whole code after him, because of everything he touched and worked on within that code. I do urge you to support this bill.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and if we could have others now give their name, organization, and statement of support.
Yeah, Dale Shimasaki. I succeeded John with my late business partner, Bill Chavez, in taking over the ownership of Strategic Education Services, and we are in support of this measure.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else? I see you by the mic. Wait a minute. Let's turn the mic on. There seems to be a problem. We're up. We're up now.
Steve Henderson, representing the California School Employees Association. Just want to thank the author for his bill recognizing a tremendous education advocate, and we are in support of this bill.
Thank you.
Jeff Baca, representing the California Association of School Business Officials, in support of the bill.
Thank you very much for coming.
Erica Hoffman on behalf of the California School Boards Association, also in support.
Thank you.
Sue Vang on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlakson in strong support. The superintendent would like to thank the chair for carrying this legislation.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Ron Rapp, California Federation of Teachers, speaking in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon. Pamela Gibbs, representing the Los Angeles County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Arturo Delgado, and we support this measure honoring John Mockler and former LACO lobbyist. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more in statement of support? Is there anybody in opposition? We have a motion to approve second. Are there any members who would like to talk? I see Assemblymember McCarty. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Vice Chair. First, I just want to say that I'm proud to be a joint author of this measure along with the Speaker and Chair O'Donnell. And I had the honor to adjourn in Mr. Mockler's memory last month, and it was quite emotional and quite touching. He was my friend and my constituent here in this Assembly District for many, many years. As was noted, he was certainly engaged on education policy, but he was engaged on many other issues as well. He had opinions and ideas on how we could pick up our trash and green waste more efficiently, how we should finance city projects more efficiently, and so he always made his mark and always had good ideas and good suggestions for policymakers. But on this education level, I think this is appropriate. I think, as the chair said, his fingerprints are left all over the education system, and we have many challenges in California with our education system, our education finance system, but without his work, we would have much more problems ahead. I also note, too, that not just in K-12 education, he made his mark. We have plenty of talk and bills on the Cal Grant program. Many people are here today because they got Cal Grants, and 15 years ago, California made the step to make the Cal Grant program an entitlement. He was the education secretary for Gray Davis, and it was a tough one, but he convinced the governor to sign that policy. Now we have tens of thousands of low-income Californians achieving their higher education goals because of stuff that he stood for, and he was just a fine individual, and I'm certainly proud that you brought this forward, Mr. O'Donnell, and please support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members? Yes, sir. No? None others? Would you like to close, sir?
Mr. Chair, I respectfully request an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I call the roll, please?
The motion is do pass. O'Donnell? Aye. O'Donnell, aye. Chavez?
Aye.
Chavez, aye. Kim?
Aye.
Kim, aye. McCarty?
Aye.
McCarty, aye. Santiago?
Aye.
Santiago, aye. Thurmond?
Aye.
Thurmond, aye. Weber?
Aye.
Weber, aye. 7. It has 7-0.
7-0. I give up my gavel.
Okay, so let's go with that. What do you want to do? Do a layout. Okay, so what number is he? Do you have that sheet? Do I need to say the AV number when I say that?
Yeah. You're gonna start with AD 30.
Okay. File item 2? Mm-hmm. Okay. Just Mr. We'll have Mr. Alejo file item 2. Mr. Alejo, come forward. File item number 2, which is AB 30.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members, and congratulations on your first hearing as Chair of Education Committee. Chairman O'Donnell. Good afternoon. At this time, we just want to make clear we're accepting the committee's proposed amendments to AB 30 as author's amendments. And today I'm presenting this bill, the California Racial Mascots Act, which will prohibit public schools in California from using the Redskins as a school or athletic team name, mascot, or nickname. For far too long, we have allowed stereotypes and derogatory terms to become normalized to our younger generations. Some of our critics may be indifferent or feel above the issue of a team name, but this is more than just a team name. It's about respect. And respect is something that every culture, every person is entitled to, and Native American tribes must not be left out. There's an obvious lack of respect when we allow teams to brand themselves with racial slurs. This is especially true in the classroom, where education is best served without cultural prejudice. It's ironic that we allow our schools to be presented by a manifestation of that exact thing, but allowing hurtful stereotypes to be promoted and normalized is damage to Native American heritage. Let me remind you that the R word was once used to describe Native Americans' scalps sold for bounty. In today's society, it has become widely recognized as a racial slur that promotes discrimination, similar to the use of the N-word. Using a racial slur as a mascot is hurtful, it's dehumanizing and degrading to the people it portrays. AB 30 will not force the immediate change of the uniforms or other materials bearing the term quote-unquote Redskins, but will allow for a phase-out that will reduce costs and allow for schools to make an easy transition. Many universities and school districts in California have already taken the lead to remove offensive mascots to Native Americans voluntarily. It's time that as a state we take a stand against racial slurs used in our public schools, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote. I have with me some people to testify. First of all, Cindy Lamar of the organization Alarm, and then a very talented young person, Dakota Brown, to testify in support.
If we could now hear from the support witnesses.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Cindy Lamar. I am the Executive Director of Capital Area Indian Resources and also a former president of the National Indian Education Association based in Washington, D.C. I was also involved as a part of Alarm in the last go-round of this bill. We tried 2 times, and during that process, 10 and 11 years ago, it was an educational process for the legislators. The second time it passed all the way through, but was vetoed by Governor Schwarzenegger. We hope that this time it will make it through. It's way past time to ensure our students, our American Indian students, have an equitable education. I want to touch on my own history. I'm Pitt River and Paiute from Northern California. One of the first bills on the book when California became a state was to take care of hostile Indians. That resulted in bounties being issued for Indian tribes. My Pitt River side, it was $5 a head. And that's it was 25 cents a scalp for the Paiute side. And that is the history. That's my great-grandfather, my grandparents. They were all subjected to a terrible type of history that we don't learn in school. I think that as an important committee such as this, the Education Committee, it's to keep focus on the California Code of Regulations in regard to public schools. And I'm going to read a few of the points. Students of Education Code, Section 201, students of public schools are entitled to participate fully in the educational process free from discrimination, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Public schools are to take affirmative steps to combat racism, sexism, and other forms of bias. And finally, schools are to teach and inform students about their rights and rights of others in order to increase awareness and understanding in order to promote tolerance and sensitivity. There are some issues that have been discussed over the past. One is local control. I remember the last 10 years ago, one of our elder assembly members said, if it were up to local control, we would probably still have slavery and other issues that we need to move past. So I also wanted to address honoring it. If we say it's not an honor, please don't tell us you're honoring us. Those are some of the things. As educated American Indian tribes, please listen to us when we say that Redskins is a racial slur. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next witness.
Machuksus. Hello, my name is Dakota Brown. I'm a 16-year-old student and a proud Miwok from the Wilton Rancheria. I'd just like to say thank you for having me here today and allowing me to speak in support of passing AB 30. I speak not only for myself, but for the many students who asked me to speak on their behalf. We are not mascots. We are unique, wonderful, and alive. All 566 federally recognized tribes across the nation and many other unregistered Native Americans are very much alive. The use of race-based mascots cause real harm. This is not about being offended. This is about protecting students. Many of us experience anxiety and fear of attending school events where we know we'll be exposed to negative images of our race. Personally, I dreaded facing Calaveras on game day because of the traditions surrounding their mascot. The hair would stand up on the back of my neck, hearing their band play the stereotypical Indian drum beats. I felt sick seeing their cheerleaders in their skimpy outfits meant to resemble our traditional buckskin dresses, students with paint splattered on their faces, and their announcer with remarks like, "A war party of wild slurskins on their way to sack the quarterback." Not playing was my only other option, but my commitment to my team drove me to attend, even though I was left emotionally drained afterwards. So when I hear other Native students say they won't attend games out of fear of getting into fights or being abused with slurs thrown in their faces, I don't blame them. In the 1950s, a proclamation was made by Governor Peter Burnett to exterminate the Indian tribes here in the Sacramento Valley to make way for the gold rush. The Native population went from over 150,000 to barely 20,000 in a short period of time because of the bounties offered by the federal government for, like Cindy said, from as little as 25 cents to up to $200 per scalp. Those scalps of my ancestors were proof of death and often referred to as Redskins. The oldest school in California to use the harmful name is Calaveras High School, which was founded in 1905 at a time when both bigotry and racism were socially acceptable. According to Dr. R. Cokewood, a Calaveras resident, historian, author, and teacher, Las Calaveras translates to the land of skulls. Combined with the mascot name, this becomes the land of redskin skulls. Followed by Tulare in 1908, Chowchilla in the 1920s, and finally Gustine in 1935, there is no way these schools chose their mascot out of honor or respect when natives were not considered full citizens and could not even vote at that time. It was not until 1968, only 47 years ago, that the Indian Civil Rights Act was passed. Although we've come a long way as a society, here we are, still fighting for an education free of mockery and hate. By having a racial slur as a name and mascot, these schools grant permission to all rivals the right to mock and make fun of Native students. Often, the schools with the disrespectful mascots are unaware of the harm they cause. I have a photo here, and this photo is of a parent wearing a T-shirt with the given title of Tribal Elder. It says Tribal Elder 2012 Track and Field. It's a tradition to give their parents these shirts since the school considers themselves a tribe of slurskins. The title of Tribal Elder is held in high regard and an honor bestowed upon our elders for years of teaching tradition and culture to our people. This right here is my tribal elder, a woman who has fought her whole life for equality and tribal rights. This is my Auntie Darts. No one's team pride should ever outweigh a person's cultural identity. Thank you for taking the time to hear my words today. I will leave you with a quote from Sitting Bull, a Hunkpapa Lakota holy man, who said, "Let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children." As a Native youth, I beg you to please pass AB 30 for the health and well-being of all people. Okasi. Thank you.